Let's have a look at the German setup. To defend against a southern approach, they have the blocks and the mines, plus a 20mm quad with another 20mm gun and one security platoon. To defend against the eastern approach, I only have this 88 with a 20mm gun, but with all this clear terrain, it should be able to get a good shot at any approaching enemy units. In the north, I have one more block and one more mine on the road, plus I've got the stack here of the engineers, submachine gun platoon, and the 50mm gun. A similar stack is down here in the town. Engineers, submachine gun platoon, and a 50mm gun. Defending against the western approach, we have the 88, the other 88, plus two security platoons underneath it. They're in the town, as is this platoon. This stack is in the woods, as is the 88 and the 20. Every German unit is in woods or a town. Now the Russian player, as the Russian player, I'm going to enter on the northwest road up there, bring in the armored units first. Two Russian tanks will be carrying the two Russian submachine gun companies. They'll be followed by the cavalry and then the wagons towing the guns. The Russian artillery is going to make very little impact on this game. I intend to set them up on those hills here. They have a pretty long range, so they should be able to get some shots in. But all these units, of course, have to be spotted. All the German units have to be spotted because they're in town hexes or wood hexes. So I'm going to do the Russian movement for the first turn, and we'll come back. Okay, the Russians have moved down the road. They're still in the woods hex, though, so there can't be any firing. There'll be no combat this turn, game turn 1. Also, the much slower cavalry and wagons have just started to enter the board. They're also in woods hexes, except for the last two units. They're actually within, just out of range of the German 88 in the town. Now the Russian plan is to drop the infantry off here. Then the four Russian tank companies move to this wooded hex and this wooded hex to set up an attack on the German infantry stack. German infantry stacked with the 50mm anti-tank gun. So that's what they'll be doing in turn 2. Okay, I've completed the movement for game turn 2. There's still been no combat. Everybody's still in tree hexes and invisible to the enemy. I have unloaded the Russian infantry into that woods hex right here, so it can move here and close assault the German infantry stack. Also, the Russian tanks are in woods hexes and ready to move up onto the plateau and engage the German infantry. And here come the cavalry and the wagons. So in turn 3 we will see some combat, and we'll be okay. Turn 3, there was still no direct fire, and movement's been completed. The Russian tanks have advanced on the infantry stack. They cannot fire at it, of course, this turn, the Germans can fire unless the submachine gun companies perform a close assault and disperse the German stack. That is a 16 attacking a defensive strength of 19, though. 1 to 2. I already rolled the die. It's the die roll was 4, which is no effect. Subtract 2 from the die roll because of the close assault, and also add 1 though because the Germans are in woods. So that was a 3. There's no effect. Now the Germans can shoot back at the armor in front of them, and also close assault. So I'll do that right now. The German armor, or German anti-tank gun, has a strength of 8, less than half range. That's a strength of 16. They will fire at the top T-34 here, 1 to 1. Well, the die roll is 4, and there's no adjustments to the die roll, so that's 4 is no effect. But the infantry can close assault, and they have engineers, so that's a strength of 9, attacking 9, 1 to 1, but minus 2 to the die roll. Actually, it's they have to attack the entire stack here, so it's 1 to 2, minus 2 though. And that's 3, reduces to a 1, which is a single D result. So at the end of turn 3, this German armor is dispersed, and everybody else is still in woods hexes, and can't be fired at next turn. But this German infantry will be attacked obviously by the submachine gun companies and the Russian tanks in the woods. So we'll move on to turn 4. Okay, now at the start of turn 4, the Russian tanks here are still dispersed. The cavalry is moved up. They're still invisible to the 88s here and here because they're right at the edge of the ridge. The others are all still in the woods. I plan the Russian cavalry to charge up next turn, I guess. Meanwhile, the the Russian tanks here can open fire on the selectively attack the gun, the 50 millimeter, sorry. I've already rolled for that. It's 4 to 1, 12 against 3, and the die roll was a 3, even with the addition of 1 for being in the woods. It's been destroyed. So the Russian has one of the 8 units it needs for a victory. Now the other Russian tank can also fire at the infantry, and it fires at the engineer. It's got a 12 to 10, which is 1 to 1. I rolled a 5, which is no effect. And the Russian infantry will do a close assault, and now because the gun has been destroyed, it's 16 to 16 or 1 to 1. And the die roll result was a 6, and that's no effect. Now the German infantry can close assault again in their turn. Meanwhile, this Russian stack recovers from the dispersal, but he attacks again. The German infantry attacks again. The odds are 1 to 2, minus 2, and the result was a 3, and that is another single D result, so they stay dispersed for this turn. And we'll move on to turn number 5. And we'll be right back. Okay, now it's turn 5, and the Russian cavalry have moved onto the plateau. Of course, they're now going to be targeted by the German units in their turn. I don't believe this stack or this stack here can see any of the Russian cavalry due to the this one being in the woods. His line of sight is blocked completely that way. He was defending toward the south. This one is in the town, and the town blocks his line of sight this way. Anyway, first though, the Russian tanks will fire at the infantry stack in the woods. They have 24 strength points against 16 defensive, 1-to-1. They rolled a 4 though. That's no effect. However, the close assault, the Russian submachine gun companies are still close assaulting. They have a 1-to-1 still, -1. They rolled a 1, which is a double D. So the Germans are now dispersed, and they won't be able to counterattack against the Russian tanks, who will recover by next turn. Now the Germans are going to concentrate their fire on this cavalry unit. They have 288s. Those are halved against infantry, so that's a strength of 20. He's stacked with a 20 millimeter. That's another 4, and he's stacked with 2 security companies. That's another 4, so it's 28-8 or 3-to-1. However, I rolled a 5 already, and that is a double D result. So just 1 cavalry will be dispersed next turn. This one, unable to move or attack. And we'll move on to turn number 6. Okay, now it's game turn 6. This cavalry has moved up in position to attack the town, the 88 in the town, but cannot. He moved more than 1 hex this turn, so he cannot. This cavalry can, but it will be at odds of 1-to-2. Meanwhile, the Battle of the Forest is still going on. However, the Russian artillery, 2 pieces of unlimbered and will be ready to fire in turn 7. This one is still climbing up the hill, and this one is the 45 millimeter. Its range is only 3, so it's got to get real close, and it's probably going to be destroyed before it gets a shot off. Anyway, the results of the combat I've already decided. These tanks have fired at the German submachine gun platoon. They had a 4-to-1, adding 1 to the die roll. I rolled a 5, and a 6 is still an X result, so that platoon is gone. The other German armor has attacked, will fire on the engineers with a 24-to-10, a 2-to-1, +1 to the die roll. It rolled a 5, which is no effect. Now the close assault, once again the submachine gun companies are attacking only the engineers. I rolled a 2, and they were, that's a double D result, subtracting 1 from the die roll. And the cavalry attacking the 88 plus the security platoons at strength of 10-to-11 or 1-to-2, -1 to the die roll. I rolled a 5. That had no effect. So those 88s are going to fire again on the Russians. Now we'll set that up, and I'll be right back. Okay, and the German turn 6. They will concentrate all their firepower, once again 28 strength points, against this stack. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. I rolled a 5, and the result, once again, is a double D. So this cavalry unit is dispersed, and on turn 7 they will not be able to move or attack, but we now have 2 cavalry units adjacent to that stack. They will be able to attack next turn. And we'll be right back after I move the pieces. Turn 7. Now, direct fire combat, the 3 Russian armored units combine to fire at the engineers. They have a strength of 36 to 10. Add 1 to the die roll because they're in the woods. So they roll a 5 and the result is double dispersed. The Russians, submachine gun, also close assaults, the same, and they rolled a 4. It's a 16 to 10 minus 2, which is 1 to 1, and you get a single D, even though they're already dispersed. It's no effect. Also, the Russian cavalry attacks the 88 and the infantry in the town hex here. They have a strength of 20 to 11, 1 to 1, minus 1 of the die roll. The result is a 4, and that's a single D. Now the Germans can have one chance, one attack. Let's zero in on it. It's the 88 in the woods plus the 20 millimeter, and they will take a shot at the Su-76. The 88 has a strength of 40, and the 20 millimeter strength of 4, which is 4 to 1. But a 6 was rolled, plus 1 is a 7, and that is no effect. So this stack looks pretty much done for next turn, which we'll get to in a minute. Also, by the way, all the Russian artillery is unlimbered and ready to fire, so they can barrage somebody next turn, but with a strength of 7, it's unlikely that they will have much of an effect. And we'll see you in turn 8. The Russians are running out of time, although they haven't suffered any casualties yet. That has no effect on victory. But they have several attacks this turn. First of all the artillery is going to barrage the 88 and the security platoons. They have a strength of 7. They're going against a strength of 11. Add 1 to the die roll. They roll a 6. That's no effect. The 3 T-34s are going to open fire on the engineer platoon. That's a strength of 36 against a strength of 10. Plus 1 to the die roll. 3 to 1. They rolled a 5. No effect. However, the Su-76 is going to fire at the stack here, the 88 and the 20 millimeter. That's a 12 to 2 or 4 to 1. They roll 4. Add 1 of the die roll. Doesn't matter that this entire stack's been wiped out. The 3 Russian cavalry units will now attack close assault the town hex with the other 88. They roll 4. Minus 1 is a single D result. And the submachine gun companies will try again with the engineers. 16 to 10, they roll a 6. That's no effect, even with a minus 1. So the engineers are okay, and they can launch their own attack, but they only have a attack strength of 3. They can close assault this stack. If that's 3 to 9, 1 to 3, but because they're engineers, they get the next odds ratio. So it's a 1 to 2 attack against that tank, but they rolled a 6, and that's no effect. So we'll have to move on to turn 9, and only 4 German units have been destroyed. Game turn 9, the Russians have only 2 turns to get to their 8th victory point. They have to eliminate 4 units. So, first thing they'll do is fire. The Su-76 has moved back to this hex to add to its firepower next turn. But anyway, this turn, once again, we have 36 to 10, 3 to 1. Plus 1, they roll a 3, which is, add 1 to the die roll, which is a double D result. So the engineers are dispersed this turn. The artillery, once again, barrages the town with a strength of 7, plus 1. They roll a 5, that's no effect. However, now that there's 4 cavalry units, one just moved here though, from the woods, so he can't participate in this attack. But he doesn't, it's not needed. Next turn he could if they survive. But that's a strength of 30 to 11, a 2 to 1. This time the die roll is 2, minus 1 because of its close assault, and the result is an X. So all 3 of these units have been eliminated. This unit just unlimbered. It's not going to survive the German combat phase. And the submachine gun companies, once again, will assault the engineers, but the result is a 5. It's a 1-to-1 odds, no effect. They're still dispersed, but we have one more time to eliminate that 1 unit for the Russians to win. Turn 10 coming up. And it is game turn 10. Now we have 4 Russian tank units firing at the engineers. The strength is 48 to 10 or 4 to 1. The die roll was a 3, and that eliminates the engineers. So on the last turn, the Russians eliminated their 8th unit to win a marginal victory. They didn't even fire at the forts with the communications, the command posts, because the best they could hope for was a 2 to 1. That's with all of their firepower. 2 to 1 plus, since the forts are in towns or woods, add 1 to the die roll. An X result is impossible. So they had to coordinate close assaulting with the Russian cavalry and firing with all the Russian armor. Adding all the artillery wouldn't have made any difference. Hopefully, if everything worked out, the Russians could have gotten a D result with a direct fire, and then a double D, maybe even an X with a close assault. But it would have taken, probably would have taken several turns, and there are no turns left. The game is over, and the Russians have won. So let me know what you think. Please, comments, suggestions, and questions down below. And I hope I can do this again with a variety of other games. PanzerBlitz is, I don't have Squad Leader, but PanzerBlitz is the most famous, one of the most famous board war games ever made. I have several others, and we'll give them all a try. Thank you.